Should the NFL start a development league, and what would it need to offer to be different from big-time college football? Plus, Clemson's defensive end Justin Foster announces his retirement from football. I'm Jay Smith, and this is After Further Review.
And now, after further review, a Clemson student's perspective on sports.
And a personal foul on number 99 of the defense after he tackled the quarterback. He's giving them business down there. That's a 15-yard penalty.
Well, welcome in, everyone. I'm Jay Smith, and yes, this is After Further Review. Thanks so much for tuning in to this week's show. Lots to discuss across college football this week, and we'll get to some of the storylines from this week specifically a little bit later in the show. But want to talk about an interesting topic. And listen, earlier this week, put out a poll on Instagram. If you're not already following the show on Instagram at After Review Show, you definitely should. A lot of cool content that we post over there. But put out a poll earlier this week, and it was kind of a fan vote, open-ended. What topics do you want to hear or discuss? What are some of the things that you're curious about, as it relates to college football? And one of the best responses that we got was submitted by Robert Basha, and he was asking about the potential NFL development league and what that possibly looked like. Now, it's important to note that the NFL has been without a development league since 2007. Okay, the last development league that the NFL had was obviously over in Europe. The NFL is pretty unique across American pro sports as one of the only leagues that doesn't have a minor league system. Again, you look at the MLB, right? They have AAA, AA, single A. The NBA has the G League, NHL has the AHL and the ECHL, even MLS, right, with their USL Championship. And then you got to throw NASCAR in there with their Xfinity Series. All of these major American pro sports leagues have a minor system of some kind. And, there's been some discussion in the past relating to the NFL about kind of the development of a spring league that would be used purely for developmental purposes. But nothing's really ever come of that. And it's interesting because, based off the research that I've done, to prepare for this show, it seems to be a pretty popular thing amongst the owners. A lot of the team owners are behind this decision. However, some of them also think, well, college football essentially does this for us already, right? You've got, essentially a minor league system with, the Power Five being the premier, and then like the Group of Five is kind of that second tier, and then you could get into the FCS level and the D2 level, and I think that it works to a certain degree, but I still think the NFL could benefit from having a pure developmental league. And, listen, again, the owners are in support of this. A lot of the football operations staff at different NFL franchises have voiced support for this. And, there are a lot of good players who don't get drafted or signed every single year, right? You got 255 selections in the draft. But there's far more players that are talented enough to give pro football, a shot and potentially make that that roster. And I think a lot of these NFL teams really could benefit from having some sort of development team or minor system that they can farm from. NFL Europe existed for 16 years. Again, that was the last development league that the NFL's had. It was around from 1991 through 2007. But, some of the things I think that they contributed to the downfall of NFL Europe was, first off, soccer rules in Europe. Okay, soccer is king in Europe and in other parts of the globe. And having American football being played at the same time, during the same stretch as the UEFA Champions League season, which is April through June, that didn't really help draw eyeballs towards NFL Europe. I mean, if anything, it would be like MLS or somebody trying to play their season in the midst of the NFL playoffs, right? It's just not the best time of year to do that. And then you also had to think, on the other side of the pond, right back in the U.S., baseball's in season, and people are watching baseball. There's a huge time difference between the U.S. and Europe, so a lot of these games being played in Europe were starting early in the morning, midday, and it just wasn't. Overall, it just wasn't a great package that was being presented, and that's what really contributed to the downfall of NFL Europe. Now, I think, I think there's still an opportunity for one day NFL to expand and either put a franchise over in Europe or try and figure something out from an international standpoint. But I feel like a lesson that you can learn from this particular league is, timing, during, when you play your season is crucial, and you have to be cognizant of what other sports are being played at the same time and what's most popular in that respective country or area of the country that you're playing in, right? I mean, you think about some regional sports like, hockey or NASCAR, and obviously those have different fan bases at different parts of the country, and so those are things you have to compete against. But I think a spring league for the NFL is what makes the most sense because there's a little bit of an open, spot of time in the market between other pro sports leagues, starting up and kind of stealing some of that market share. And also, if you think about the spring league, it's essentially, not directly, but it's essentially a indirect extension of the season. Between the Super Bowl and the draft, it's really a lull in pro football, right? There's really nothing going on. There's nothing to talk about. There's some like right now we've got some I'm going to use air quotes here, drama surrounding Deshaun Watson in Houston and Russell Wilson in Seattle, and if they're going to get traded or whatever. I don't pay as much attention to the NFL as I used to. I've just kind of been disenfranchised with it the last, I'd say, 5 years. But again, the point is that after the Super Bowl, there's really not much to keep even a casual football fan invested. Like I watch, the NFL on the weekends. I pay attention to, for a time, both. I think it was both Fox and CBS were blacked out in my market, so I was really left to just watch Sunday Night Football on NBC and Monday Night Football on ABC. But I paid attention to the games, paid attention to the playoffs, and obviously watched the Super Bowl. But I think that spring time block between mid-February until the draft is an ideal time, at least in the U.S., right, and at least in the United States, for keeping viewers tuned in to the NFL. And that's just from a, perspective of, would people care? Can we get eyeballs on it? That's not speaking to, which we're going to get into in a second here, but that's not even speaking to the potential benefits it can provide these franchises within the NFL. And obviously the biggest one is player development, right? That's the main reason for having any minor league system across NASCAR, hockey, baseball, whatever, and basketball. You're developing that next, not necessarily generation of talent, but you're providing a proving ground. You're providing a self-contained proving ground to determine which players, teams, whatever, can move up to the next level. Now, obviously, college football is huge, and it's huge really in certain regions of the country. I mean, every area of the country is essentially covered with a Power 5 conference. But just from my few travels around the country at different places, to go attend college football games, I can tell you that in some areas of the country it's not as big a deal as it might be in the SEC, right, and just regionally. But again, I think college football is certainly something that these NFL executives and owners and people are going to have to look at and understand. on Instagram, went back and forth with a couple of people about potentially doing a one and done year, one and done rule in college football, and I don't really see that as something that's feasible. Mostly because, it's not going to look great for universities because they're not going to be able to graduate many of their student athletes at all. Especially football, right? I mean, if this guy comes in and he has pro level talent, or even if he doesn't necessarily have obvious pro level talent, but he thinks he can make it in the development league for the NFL, he's not going to stick around more than a year. He's just going to go and play for a year at some school, and that's going to make recruiting a lot more difficult. It's going to make everything a lot more difficult for college coaches. So I don't think there would be enough support for that kind of rule, and I don't think it really makes sense specifically for football. Just because, and again, I'm not as well versed in something like basketball where I know one and done is a thing, but it seems to me, based off of just a casual viewing experience, fewer guys come into college ready to jump to the professional level within a year on the football end than on the basketball end. Like if a guy like Zion Williamson goes to college, you pretty much know. I mean, he could play in the NBA now. He was in high school, right, in Spartanburg. He could play in the NBA then, almost, and he only really needed that 1 year at Duke to get some experience under his belt, develop a little bit more, and then he was pretty much on to the NBA. And I feel like one of the things most successful college programs do is they develop, overlooked athletes. Hunter Renfro from Clemson's a great example, and one that I'm very familiar with. I mean, the guy, just an average-looking dude, wasn't anything special. I think he might have been a 3-star, and now he's playing in the NFL, and he's not especially tall. He's not especially big. I mean, he's just an average guy. He's just got crazy sticky fingers. But the point is that Clemson took that, developed it into, and not just developed it, allowed Hunter to showcase his natural ability. Because make no mistake, Hunter Renfro is an extremely talented individual naturally. Clemson helped develop and hone that talent, but they also provided a platform for him to showcase his talent so that he could draw the attention of NFL franchises like Oakland, who would end up drafting him. And yes, you might get some of that exposure in an NFL development league, but in certain areas of the country, as we've talked about, you're going to get better exposure playing college football. You're going to get better exposure playing college football than you ever would in some sort of development league for the NFL. And I think the NFL realizes that. I think that's why there's been no concrete minor league system for the NFL since really 2007. It's because I think they understand, while there is a demand, there is a recognition of how it would be beneficial for owners and franchises, there's also this recognition that, listen, college football is in some areas more popular than in the NFL, especially in a lot of, there's only a handful of states within the SEC that do have pro franchises. So, I mean, Alabama, Mississippi, there's no pro franchises here. There's no professional sports teams, no pro football teams in those states. So college football is king. Alabama is essentially the pro football. That's the professional franchise for the state of Alabama. Is the Alabama Crimson Tide. It's pretty much it. New Orleans, you've got the Saints, Texas, you got Houston and Dallas and all that, but those people in College Station, man, they love their Aggies. And so again, when it comes to where the eyeballs are and how big of a platform those players are going to get and how well they're going to be able to showcase their abilities, I think college football for a lot of areas of the country is still going to be the most advantageous avenue for a lot of these kids. Now, one of the things with the development league that is kind of interesting is that if you've got, say, let's take the Patriots and Bill Belichick, right? If you've got a franchise where coach has been there, almost a couple decades or whatever, has a system in place and starts to kind of funnel that down through the organization, you could possibly get to a point where These kids come out of college, they go into the development league, and they spend 4 or 5 years kind of under the tutelage umbrella. It's almost think of it as like if you equate it to college football, it's almost like Nick Saban and all of his assistant coaches that are out there coaching at different schools now, whether that's Lane Kiffin at Ole Miss or Kirby Smart at Georgia or Sarkisian at Texas. Like those coaches then teaching those players, like it all funnels back to Saban, right? And Saban's like the overarching, I guess, figurehead of all of that. If that makes sense. That's kind of what I'm picturing in my head when I think of a player development system where it's all going back towards that, making it to the pro level, the NFL level, and having a development league, will help players hone and improve in areas that they need help with. Regardless of the position, whether it's quarterback, receiver, tight end, defensive end. I mean, the mechanics of the game are certainly something that when you get to the NFL level, you're expected to kind of have all that figured out, right? A lot of that stuff is introduced in high school, and then college is really you're learning not just the system that particular coach wants to run, but also the good fundamentals, so that if you have the opportunity to play in the NFL, you can go out there and perform and execute with little to no supervision as far as mechanics go. Now decision making and all that other stuff, that's a whole different can of worms. But by and large, the expectation once you get to the NFL is that you're obviously willing to learn and adapt to that particular coach's coaching style, but that you pretty much understand your strengths, your weaknesses, and what you need to improve on, those sorts of things. But another point here within this NFL developmental league discussion is that you have to be aware of the failure of these other, knockoff, again, air quotes here, knockoff alternative leagues, whether that's the USFL, the United Football League, the Arena Football League. May they rest in peace. I loved watching Arena Football. Arena Football 2, the NIFL, the Fall Experimental Football League, Alliance of American Football, and now both versions of the XFL have come and gone. Now, I believe Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson and a couple other individuals have talked about or have plans to bring the XFL back. I don't know if that's still in the works, but the article that I'm referencing that was written only a few months ago did not indicate that's the case. So again, unless there's something that I'm missing news-wise with the XFL, I don't think there's been an official announcement that they're going to return. And they had, a pretty popular following at the beginning of 2020, and then obviously, COVID-19 hit, and that essentially folded that league. It was a huge contributing cause to the failure of that XFL league, because it just wasn't working for them. Obviously, with everything that was shutting down, it wasn't working for most anybody at that point. I still think though that there is room for a developmental league, but it might be something that individual franchises decide to do rather than the NFL collectively saying everybody is expected to field a developmental team and provide facilities and all that sort of stuff. I still think though, again, when it comes to when during the year you want to run this, it's got to be after the Super Bowl. It's got to be after the Super Bowl. I don't think that takes away from the significance of the Super Bowl because, right, you understand that the upcoming games in the developmental league, like, they don't impact the real, regular NFL. So the Super Bowl still remains the biggest game in the sport. But it's something more to look forward to if you're a football fan. College football's done. College football will have finished a month prior to that point, right? College football finishes second week of January, depending on when the championship is played. But, that's out of the way. You won't have to deal with a lot of other, pro sports in their like peak season, like baseball, right? They don't They don't get into their playoffs until later in the summer. You have some regional sports going on, hockey, NASCAR, that kind of starts up after the Super Bowl, but I think there will certainly be a market for any form of football year-round. I mean, again, I think most Americans, most people will watch football year-round, and you'd got to think that the product they'd put on the field would be pretty entertaining. I mean, again, it may be rough around the edges at times, but listen, I've watched plenty of arena football games before. I used to watch a couple of Canadian Football League games. Now that's something that I think at least one person brought up as a potential option, and I don't agree with that. I don't think the Canadian Football League is going to be able to serve that role for the NFL, mostly because the rules and the player salaries and a lot of other elements of the CFL are completely different from the NFL. And the other thing is that the CFL announced, when COVID hit, that their season may end up being canceled. The whole 2020 season may be canceled. Obviously, the NFL, right? They were able to play their games. They got, I think, every game in. And so I think the CFL is not quite as immune to those types of issues and things as the NFL is. But I think the biggest reason why the CFL doesn't fit that mold as a development league for the NFL are the rules, with some of the changes that they've made, and not bad ones necessarily, but just changes. And I just don't think it'll work. But listen, end of the day, okay, as we wrap this up. This is about making more money. This is an opportunity for the NFL to put more games on television and keep eyeballs on their product, right? Which is a football game at the end of the day. They can sell tickets. They can sell merchandise. They'll find a network to broadcast these games. And with that NFL logo, with that shield, behind the brand, I think anything is possible, and the league will figure out a way to turn some sort of profit from it. I think it might be a good idea to emulate the baseball minor league system, where you don't put your developmental team in the same city as your main franchise, right? I think if you're like, say, the Carolina Panthers, right? They've got a stadium in Charlotte, right? Because they're really split. They're meant to be for both Carolinas, North and South. Maybe that minor league team gets a stadium somewhere in Charleston, or maybe in Columbia. I don't know, but that's kind of what I'm envisioning would work best for this. But either way, it's an interesting topic, and I appreciate Robert for bringing it up. It's something that I've thought about before, but I've never really explored. And again, I had an opportunity here the last few days to kind of do some research on it, and there's clearly interest in it. I mean, I've found numerous reports and articles about this possible development of a developmental league, and what that would look like, and how it would run. But we'll have to see. So far, no concrete announcements, and with COVID and everything it brought to the table, a lot of the uncertainty it brought, I don't think, if it was on the back burner, if it was a long-term goal for the NFL within the next 10, 15, 20 years, I think it might have been pushed back a few years because of COVID. So it could easily be late 2020s, maybe even into the 2030s, before any sort of concrete announcement would be made, just because, again, the logistics of all that, I'm sure, are quite immense. But either way, let's take a break. We come back, we're going to be talking some interesting news coming out of Clemson a couple of days ago. Defensive end Justin Foster has announced his retirement from football. We will discuss that next. Welcome back to the show. It's the second half of this week's After Further Review. Appreciate you tuning in. And discussion for this second half of the show is going to center around Clemson's Justin Foster, he announced his retirement from football, citing issues with asthma and COVID-19. This came out a couple of days ago, and posted a statement on his Twitter account, and said that a combination of asthma, allergies, and COVID-19 have made it impossible for him to return to the field. And I have his statement that he posted here. I'm going to read a little bit of it, not the whole thing. It is pretty long. Obviously, thanks a lot of people, but you can find the tweet on Twitter. I'm sure yourself. Just do a quick search. But he says, this is a direct quote here. So, quote, "Today is a difficult day for me, but it is also a day of reflection and gratitude. With sadness but no regret, I have decided it is in my best interest to call it a career and hang up football. Playing for Clemson University, the fans, Coach Sweeney, the coaches, and the support staff has been a tremendous honor." And goes on to talk about his time as a Clemson Tiger. And then he says, this again, direct quote, "For those unaware, I was born with asthma and allergies that, when active, affect my ability to breathe normally. The combination of these conditions, along with contracting COVID, made for severe difficulty to perform physically. While my situation has improved, I am not in a position now, nor do I see that position soon, to step back on the field." And then, talks about consulting multiple medical professionals, and the focus is now shifted to recovering long term. And, this is something that obviously affects a lot of people. I mean, there's millions of people with asthma. I have it in a mild form. I don't think quite as severe as Justin Foster seems to have it. But, the physical endurance and the physical stamina that's required of these college football players is quite immense. And so you got to wonder, obviously, health is the number one thing here, and obviously wanting to be healthy. But if he's consulting multiple medical professionals and they've come to the conclusion that it's probably best for him to not play football anymore, it must have been a rather severe case. Now, I mean, again, this is a guy that's a fifth-year senior. He would have been eligible, right, as a fifth-year senior this coming season in 2021. So he's played for 4 years, been on the team for 4 years, has graduated, and has a job offer on the table. So I'm not saying that he decided to leave because he had a job offer, but I think he understood, for my long-term health, I've got my degree, I've got a job opportunity, I'm going to pursue this, and I'm going to decide not to come back. Now, he could have easily put out a statement and just said, "Hey guys, I'm not coming back for my fifth year," and I think it was a really it impressed me. It impressed me that he was so honest. I think the honesty of this statement impressed me. I think him being open and candid about the fact that he struggles with this issue was impressive, and I think it's certainly something that we didn't see a lot of, right, 5, 6, 7 years ago, in terms of college football players or just players in general announcing their retirement. But, whether it's, Luke Kuechly or whoever, a lot of these guys now understand long-term health effects of playing football. And if COVID really did affect him as severely as he's indicating, then obviously, you would want to take precautions. I know for a fact that Foster is not the only Clemson football player to have a really rough bout with COVID. Xavier Thomas for Clemson also had a pretty bad case of COVID in the fall, and so Xavier Thomas tested positive for COVID in April, but the symptoms persisted basically up until when fall camp was about to start. So I know that there's been a lot of reports out there of people who've gotten COVID, and then they'll get better within a week or two, and they're fine. And then some people end up having persistent symptoms. That seems to be what happened for both Xavier Thomas and Justin Foster at Clemson. And this is now Sweeney talking about this issue the other the other day. He said, and this is a direct quote talking about Foster, he said, he had a very tough fall. He's always had challenges with asthma and allergies, but when he got COVID last summer, that really set him back. So, he was working, obviously, on trying to recover for a little while, but then after talking to the doctors, decided it was best to hang up the cleats. And Xavier Thomas actually had to sit out all of fall camp, and he missed the early part of the 2020 season, didn't have near the impact that a lot of people thought he was going to have because he was so sidelined from COVID side effects. And Foster was, one of Clemson's leading edge defenders in 2019. He had 10.5 tackles for loss, which was second on the team back in 2019, and was projected to be a starter for this past season in 2020, but was never able to get on the field. And, listen, obviously wish the best to him and hope that he's in good health, but you got to wonder what kind of an impact he could have potentially had this past season and even going forward into this coming season or possibly in the NFL. And that's a decision that he certainly didn't take lightly, and you can tell that from his statement that he posted on Twitter, just saying that it's an emotional time for him, and he's going through a lot, and I can't imagine having that sort of that level of success and then having to make the decision that if I keep doing this, I may have an issue that I may not be able to come back from. So certainly a lot of respect towards him, and I appreciate and admire the honesty with which he put out that statement. But that was a pretty big announcement. Like I said, it came out on Wednesday of this week, and I don't think it caught a lot of people off guard, but I think the expectation was that he would continue to try and work and come back and play in his last season as a fifth year senior. But obviously, Foster decided that he will leave the program and retire. But obviously, want to wish him all the best. That's pretty much it, though, for this edition of After Further Review. I think the next week's show is we got several topics submitted through Instagram that are pretty interesting, and we'll probably keep doing those for a couple of weeks. Also, an exciting announcement. This is courtesy of Anchor, who sponsors this podcast. Anchor has partnered with WordPress, and the After Further Review website was just launched yesterday. I sat down and used WordPress. I don't know if any of you listening have ever built your own website. And this is not an ad for WordPress, but unless they want to sponsor the show, in that case, I would be happy to record an ad for them. But it was pretty easy, very easy UI and figuring things out. They have multiple ways of viewing your website, whether if you want to get in there and get your hands dirty with the code, or if you want to kind of have a little bit of a cleaner interface. But either way, it took a little less than an hour to build out the AFR website, and so that is now live, and you can find our website at afterfurtherreview, I think .wordpress.com. But I'll probably make a post about that coming soon. So again, a little bit of a different way to end the show, but it was a neat partnership between Anchor and WordPress. Excited to get that off the ground. That's something I've been meaning to do for a while. And what's nice about the website is because of their partnership with Anchor, all of the episodes are transcribed automatically on the website. So, if you ever want to go and check out past episodes, you do it right there. You can contact the show, do all sorts of stuff. So working on that. I'll let you know if there's any new exciting announcements. But appreciate you tuning in, and as always, have a great week. We'll see you back here next time. I'm Jay Smith, and this is After Further Review.